Hey guys, it's Shane from the Man Up Podcast. I'm your producer, and we just want to take a minute to let you guys know we had a bit of technical issues on this podcast. Some of the audio doesn't sound quite as good as it normally does, and we apologize for that. Obviously, this isn't going to sound quite as good as what it normally sounds like, but the content is still excellent. Mark and Matt did a great job. We hope you enjoy it, and again, we apologize that it just doesn't sound quite as good as it normally does, but we hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
And he needed that. He didn't see it coming. He didn't know he needed it. But once it was over, he's, wow, man, I'm glad I had it.
Yeah, and revolutionary in changing his life. Welcome to Man Up Podcast. I'm Mark Mohler, joined today by Matt Haney. If you're a long-time listener to the podcast, you're going to notice that we're missing someone who has been here every single time, Mr. Terry Waltney, who's on vacation and is either graciously or less than intelligently giving us the reins here. So we're going to hope for the best. Yeah, we're going to hope for the best. Terry, we miss you, and hopefully you'll let us do this again after you hear this. So, nonetheless, well, we're going to talk. Yeah, probably. We're going to talk this week about the weekend that you don't know you need yet.
Vegas?
Not Vegas. No. So we're going to talk about the weekend. So let me ask you something, Matt. Have you ever gotten something that you needed, but you didn't know you needed? Man, I sound just like a game show host right now.
I think we might play with you. I've ever gotten something I needed, but I didn't know I needed it.
But you did not.
Until you got it.
There you go.
Probably an unorthodox answer, but the first thing that comes to mind is, a knock on the door with a search warrant being served. To be honest with you.
Yeah, well, yeah, so that I was thinking more like
I know what you're thinking.
a Christmas gift that you open up like your grandma gave you. Oh, thanks, Grandma.
No,
Did
she
you
always
get
called me
home?
underwear and socks.
Which you
I
need.
need.
Yeah, but you knew you needed those at a time.
No, seriously, that was the Lord stepping in a way in my life, and He completely changed the trajectory of my life that night. And that officer did not know that he was working for the Lord, but he was.
Yeah.
And but I mean, to answer your questions, yeah, I mean, when I think about that. Now, what we're talking about today is not that extreme. Honestly.
Yeah, I was going to say normally on a podcast you start light and then you get deep, but we're going to dive in apparently here. So yeah, so tell me then just a little bit. What did that experience do for you? So I know your story. You and I have been friends for a long time. I know your story. You know my story. Listeners may not know everything. We don't feel like we have to get too deep into it, but you got a knock on the door from the police, and you opened it up, and there stood an officer who was going to take you on a little trip. And what did that do? What did that do for you, long term as an individual?
Well, real quick, the rest of the story is on a previous podcast. So,
Sure.
Gosh, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but it'll have my name and things. So you can hear those stories.
Yeah, and we can put a link on show notes to do that.
Yeah, sure.
Shane,
I mean,
can we do that?
we can do that.
We can't do that. I don't know. Does Shane ever get a head nod? Does Shane ever get recognized?
I talk about him every time I'm on here.
Well, I've only been on here once, and I didn't know we were supposed to or could or couldn't.
Okay, go rabbit trailing.
Sorry.
And that's why he's never going to let us do this.
That's right.
So all joking aside, man, when that happened, it just set some things in motion in my life, and at the end of the day, it landed me in a faith-based facility where I was, where the Lord just was able to separate me from the world and literally set me on a hill where I couldn't go anywhere and talk to me and get me to see things His way, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And I can look back and see changes begin to take effect in my life, take a totally different path. I mean, I was quite literally headed towards death or prison, And he said, not you, for some reason. And he went, and he sent me this way.
Sure, just his grace and his favor. I think I could relate somewhat to a similar experience. I was in a season of just making ends meet in my job. Doing it okay, but not doing it near as well as I felt like I could or felt like I should. And just kind of had just a period of, I know I could do this better, but I can't keep doing it the way I'm doing it, but I don't know how to do it better. And that all got straightened out. And I thought, at that moment, the answer to all my questions and the answer to all my pain was, well, if I could just do my job better, then everything else would be okay. What happened was I got, from that point, in the course of a few months, really unlocked some doors that led to some pretty significant success in my job and what I was doing, which alleviated one struggle but opened up a whole different struggle. Because at that point in time, I felt like, man, if I can just get my job right, everything else is going to be okay. Well, there were about 4 other things that I needed to deal with that I couldn't deal with until I dealt with the job part. Now, the job part's set, and we're good. I'm succeeding at my job. I'm doing what I need to do as an employee, as a husband, as a dad. I'm providing for my family. I'm doing it in a way where I'm enjoying it. But yet, there was still an emptiness there. And what I realized was that emptiness was I was trying to place all of my fulfillment in that job. And I thought, well, if I can get this job straight, then everything else is going to be okay. Well, I was still not fulfilled. Yeah, my job was better. I was being more successful, being more profitable, yet I was still just as unfulfilled. And what the Lord did through that year now, at this point, probably process, was He helped me realize that a job is a job. A job is something that you do to provide for your family. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but just simply, ultimately for me, the job was to provide for my family, and He had a whole nother purpose for my life that I wasn't even living out. That once I got my job settled, then I could really step into a deeper purpose of sharing the gospel, a deeper purpose of a teaching ministry, and all of that opened up. So again, I didn't know that I needed all of that to happen in my heart. I thought all I needed to do was just get better at my job, and then thought, I circled it around. And
I was like, where's the gift?
Yeah, there it is. There it is. I circled it around. I thought all I needed to do was get my job straight, but what I really needed to do was learn that I had gifts and abilities that He wanted me to use. But I had to get the job thing out of the way so I could clearly see what He really wanted to do.
Sure.
So it was like several things that I didn't know I needed until I got them, and now I'm able to even pass that on to other men. So, all right. So that's what we're going to talk about this week is a weekend with Man Up, a weekend that you don't know you need yet. Now, some of our listeners, some of you may be sitting there listening to this, and you've been to a Man Up event, you've been to our adventure camp, you know you need it. You needed it last year. You need it again this year. Some of you have already signed up to be part of our event in October. Some of you are listening to this because someone has recommended this podcast to you. So that's what we're talking about this week is not just, hey, come to our event, but helping you realize that God probably is aligning some things to allow you to be there. And that's what God does. I think if you look at the scripture, you see that God moves unexpectedly. Beginning from the beginning. So as we read the Bible today, we realize that we're reading it from a completed version. In other words, when I start reading the story of Genesis at Genesis 1:1, I know what's about to happen. I know what's going to happen in Genesis 3. I know what's going to happen in Genesis 12. I know all that, right? So if you experience that, like I've started reading, so I'm asking you this, Matt. Have you ever experienced that reading the scripture? Like I know the end of the story.
I get to talk.
You do?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, not at first. I mean, now I do.
Okay.
But myself, like probably some of our listeners, man, you never read it. So we do kind of know what's coming in theory. And I would say today, yeah. I mean, if I start in a chapter or a book, I got to know where that's going. The Lord doesn't always work that way. I'm all the time like, man, God, you just show me what I need to do. And he's like, no, I'll give you this little piece right here. I'll show you this little bit.
Yeah.
And my phone is ringing. It's driving Mark.
It is driving. Please, if you're calling Matt right now, please hang up.
It's recorded, Mark.
I know, just in case.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And yeah, I mean today, but the people, the people that are in the Bible, that the stories are written about, they did not know anything. They did not know
Yeah.
what they were doing. And reading ahead in some of your notes, I mean, probably, in my opinion, one of the best examples of, basically a weekend, 3 days, is Paul. And, God put him down blindly. He didn't know he needed that.
Yeah.
And it was basically a weekend.
Yeah.
And he needed that. He didn't see it coming. He didn't know he needed it. But once it was over, he's, wow, man, I'm glad I had that.
Yeah, and revolutionary in changing his life. So if you're not familiar with that story, Paul, at this point in time, his life was Saul. And he was a Pharisee who was a Jewish religious leader. He lived during the time of Christ, but he comes into play in Scripture after Jesus is crucified, after Jesus is resurrected, and just incidentally, to give away the surprise ending of the entire Scripture, in the end, Jesus wins and sets all things right. But in the meantime, we have recorded in the book of Acts where Saul is on the road to Damascus with letters in hand. So this is key. With letters in hand, giving him permission to do to Christians whatever, like a carte blanche, you get to do whatever you want to stamp these rebels and revolutionaries out.
So just to paint the full picture, what would you have done? Awesome.
I mean, I think we Paul talks about how he was, a murderer. I think the Scripture talks about he's breathing threats and breathing murder. So, Paul would have gone to any length to get rid of Christianity, and in his mind, at this point, thinks that he's doing the right thing. He thinks he is serving the living God by stamping out Christianity. And oh boy, does he get a surprise. Oh boy, does he get a surprise. He's on his way to Damascus. He is intending, and we know the links, because if you read just before this is the stoning of Stephen. And they, the Jewish people stone him because he's preaching the gospel. And the little cameo in there, Saul is approving of what's going on.
He's standing there.
He's standing there. He's part of it. He is approving what is going on. And so he's on his steed, and sees this light from the sky. He's blinded. He's knocked into the dirt, and he says, "Who is this? Who are you?" He said, "I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting." And then the cool part of the story is God sends someone to see him. Now, how would you like to have been that guy?
I had this conversation just the other day, and can you imagine? Like, God, do you know who this guy is?
What?
I said, wait a minute, you want me to I need to take a bodyguard?
Sure.
I'm going to see. And that guy, I said, I need you to go see this. So that guy was showing a little bit of what he needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a small part in the Bible, but what a huge part, even in our lives today, that guy played just by being obedient.
Yeah, and I think that's the larger moral of this story, about what you need, you don't know you need. Paul is blinded, then he receives his sight again. He begins to preach the gospel. He starts churches. He's monumental. The Spirit uses him to pen a majority of the New Testament. I mean, just all these things that happen with Paul. But the other part of that is not just Paul, not just what he did, what God did in his life, but what God has done through ages upon ages upon ages of Christianity because of what he did to Paul. And so I think one thing that's definitely worth mentioning at this point is this also encompasses a weekend you don't know you need that other people may need you to have.
Yeah, I mean, so Paul calls himself a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was an educated man. He knew he had all this knowledge, and he was leaning on his own understanding and his knowledge, and that's what he was living his life on. And then God stepped in, and he began following God, leaning on God instead of his own knowledge. So, and because of that, he affected so many other people, and still does today. I mean, the millions upon millions of lives that he has been used in is uncountable. And so a lot of times I think we do that. In our own understanding, maybe, well, what about the weather? Well, I don't want to sleep longer. I don't know a tent. I don't know how to cook on a campfire. I mean, whatever our knowledge tells us. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, there's a reason you're listening to this podcast. And you need to be considering what that reason truly is. Because it ain't because Mark and Matt are on here, I can guarantee you that. So, try to not lean on your own understanding. Mm-hmm. Lean on God's understanding and realize that you're hearing this podcast right now for a reason. And that reason is more than likely much bigger than you. And your 2.5, 3 days could end up making such an effect on a countless number of lives, yours plus others, because of the work done in your life, just like with Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can take Paul, you can take anyone else. I mean, you can take Peter, for example. Again, Peter is one of the first disciples that Jesus calls. And if you look at any of these guys, they're unexpected. He didn't go to Jerusalem University and ask for the top scholars. He went to the seashore and called fishermen. He went to the tax collector's booth and called a tax collector. I mean, he called a guy who was a borderline terrorist. I mean, he did not call the educated, wealthy upper class. He called a bunch of late teen, maybe at oldest early 20s fishermen. He didn't. So anyway, he calls Peter, and Peter, man, just throughout the Gospels, we see Peter is always the first one to speak, and normally probably should have listened just a little bit longer. At least let Jesus finish the question. And so, but we know Peter had this, he was, to give credit where credit is due, the most passionate of the group, maybe. And then he has this massive, massive failure around a campfire where he literally denies that he even knows Jesus. Which is interesting. If you remember, Jesus has already said earlier in one of his sermons, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father. So don't forget that. Don't ever forget. When you read this story, and you read Peter's fall, and you think about what had to have been going through Peter's mind, it never says in the scripture that Peter remembered that, but he almost had to have. But nonetheless, Peter is had this massive failure, and Jesus meets him on the seashore, and then has this restoration. which is what we don't expect. Like, we don't expect God to restore someone who has made such a magnificent failure of themselves. And I think when we think about that, we see this unexpected move in Paul, where it's given this major purpose, but then we see the same unexpected move in Peter, where he's restored back, even given a larger purpose than he probably even knew.
And so Christ says, you deny me. Well, first he's having a conversation with Peter, and Peter gives the right answer, and he says, you didn't give me that answer. Father.
Don't forget about that.
Give it to me. If you deny me before the people, I'll deny you before the Father. By the way, Peter, you're going to deny me. He says, no way. And you are. And you're going to do it 3 times. You're going to do it before the sun rises, basically. And then he says later on, but I love you. You're going to do great things for me. And I'm going to restore you. And how many of us need that? How many of us have walked a similar journey? And I think the bigger picture of that is you can fall, you can fail. It doesn't matter. When God tells you you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And Christ not only knew Peter was going to fail there, he also knew the great things Peter was going to do later. Through, and even after Christ was gone, Peter fought some, different things, different situations.
Yeah.
So he was still very much human. That's a great story of restoration, of failure, but of a bigger purpose. Again, Peter's purpose was so much bigger than him. And he didn't realize that at the time. You read the Gospels, hold on, just like we touched on a while ago, most people, they were just living life. But they were living life in a way, they were doing everything they could to follow the Lord and to honor Him, most of them. And to honor Him. At least at some point there was a transformation when they made that route. I don't think a single one of those people in the Bible thought that thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. You go back to the Old Testament, thousands of years later, we would be reading about them and studying them and learning from them. And God would still be using those people to affect our lives. And imagine what He can do in your life in 3 days. Was it 2.5?
2.5.
About 2.5 days.
That's how much
what He can do in your life.
So.
That and the positive effects you can have on others.
Yeah. So I think the statement needs to be, we read the scripture and we see that the Lord tells us, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. So we read the scripture and we see the pattern of God.
He's still restoring people.
He's still restoring people. He's still doing unexpected things. So share just a minute. Share just a minute of you've had a camp experience. I've had a camp experience. One thing that you saw God do that was like in your camp experience, that you say, wow, that is not what I expected. That is not what I expected. I didn't expect that to happen, but man, it's made a huge impact on me.
I truly believe for me it was, you go to church every Sunday, most of us. That we go to church, you stand up, put your hands behind your back, and you sing. Some people get really bold and they raise their hands. We just stand there and we sing. For me, when I walked into the tent in the first praise and worship service, and there were all these men that were truly praising and worshiping and dancing and singing and raising their arms and just really letting go and watching the Holy Spirit move through that. And I believe there were men there doing things and praising in ways that they never thought that they would or could, for that matter. And then you saw guys, on the trail end, we think we hide it. Most of us, when we're broken, we're hurting, it bleeds out of us. And we think we hide it, but we really don't. You can see those broken and hurting men walking in, walking out, and we're totally different. And I suspect that even after that weekend, there was a lot of things still happening, even while those men were restored.
Yeah, I think so. I think you mentioned the tent. You mentioned over the weekend. One of the things I think that we look for many times is this sudden radical moment in our life that's supposed to change everything. And oftentimes that's not the way God works. Oftentimes, like you said, it's a continual movement. Sometimes God sets things in motion by that one moment. But he's continuing to work. And that's what he tells us. He says that he'll bring about that, what he started in you, he will bring it about. He's continually bringing it about to fruition. So the tent, I think one of the things for me, the unexpected moment for me was how powerful the campfire time is. So if you have been to a Man Up event, you know what I'm talking about. If you've never been to a Man Up event, you know that throughout the weekend there are a lot of different activities, and there's some fun stuff. We have arm wrestling contests. We throw axes. I know we got an anvil throw. We got some more stuff coming this year. So there's just some of that, just fun, friendly, semi-intense competition. And those things are enjoyable. Significant, though, really is the worship services in the tent and the time around the campfire. And so we have four services in the tent. Each one is just a worship service. We have music, we have times of testimony, someone brings a sermon. And then we have campfire times. And what I like to say is that God speaks in the tent, but God moves at the campfire. And for me coming from someone who is pretty accustomed to being in front of groups of people preaching the word, I was unexpected about how impactful the campfire time was going to be. And so for me, specifically for me, one of the things that happened, and it's happened in every camp experience I've ever had at a Man Up or even a similar event, is that as you're around the campfire, and please, if you're listening to this, let this be encouraging to you, not scary. Dudes will start to open up, and they will start to share things. And I remember the first time I said this. Someone, and I don't remember what the dude shared, but I remember him sharing something, and then he shared, and he said, I've never told anyone this. You and I were around the same campfire.
With you.
Yeah, and then the next guy, I've never told anyone this. And it was almost to the person. It was like, I've never really told anyone this, or maybe you know this, but everybody else doesn't. And it just really, the Lord really laid on my heart to share. Satan, up till this point in your life, has had you bound to the lie that if you shared this, someone would reject you, someone would cast you out, you would be, they would think ill of you. And look what happened, guys. You shared things you've never shared before, and we're still here. And that power that Satan had in that moment is no longer there. It is gone. And he will never have that stronghold in your life again. To me, that realization was so unexpected, because I've shared things with people and they're like, oh, dude, you've shared things. And it's like, man, that felt good to get that off my chest, right? We've shared things with each other and have been like, wow, that felt good. I'm glad I told you that. I feel better. There's a big difference in feeling better and feeling delivered. And those dudes got delivered from a bondage that Satan had in their life. So that was unexpected for me. What else though? What else? How about the solitude? How well do you do, Matt Haney, anyone that knows you, how well do you do at sitting still and being quiet? On the scale of 1 to 10, and feel free to use negative numbers if you need to. How well do you do at sitting still and being quiet?
I'm pretty good at being quiet.
How well do you do?
But not standing still. I can't stand still. I mean, I watch, if I'm watching a sporting event, I'm usually standing in the middle of the living room. They run the TV swinging back and forth, and my kids are like, Dad, I can't see the TV. But actually,
so what sporting events do you like? We've had this discussion before. For our listeners, Matt Haney, what sporting events do you like?
well, primarily motorsports, motorcycles,
Okay.
cars, whatever. The Olympics are going on right now, and I've kind of gotten into Olympic volleyball. Both of my daughters play volleyball.
Sure.
I've learned that, ironically, I really enjoy watching volleyball. And so last night I'm hooping and hollering at the TV, and Ashley's like, "What are you watching?" It's like Serbia and China. She's like, "Who are you pulling for?" I don't know. I don't know. I don't speak English. So anyway,
Yeah, that's probably going to get into that.
so I mean, I just didn't know what to pull for. That's all. But anyway, but a while ago when you started talking, and after I had said that about the tent, I got to thinking, the solitude, man. That was really something for me personally, because I do it more and more now. I used to never just sit still and just say, "God, speak to me." And I've learned that it's so important. But we're so busy in life. Finding that time is truly challenging. And the Lord says He'll always provide a way. The world puts blinders on us. So being put out here and just having an opportunity to just sit, and it's silent. You know, like there's all these men out here and they're scattered out. There's nobody talking. You don't hear not even a low murmur anywhere. Just everybody is spending time along with the Father, and it's you can just feel the Spirit, and it's really incredible.
Yeah. So if you don't, again, circle back. If you've never been to an event that we do, at least an hour's worth we schedule. And what's so funny too, this is what so many of the men said was the most impactful for them.
Mm-hmm.
But we schedule a time where you go into a secluded, you know, we're right on the edge of Shawnee National Forest, so some guys will hike out. You know, some guys walk, 100 meters into the woods. Some guys I know, our buddy Shane, who's off camera here, running the sound and the video, like he hiked a long way away. The dude that was a bass player in our band, I thought he had got lost. I thought, this guy's never coming back. Like, we needed him, and I'm like, where is he at? He needs to be on stage. And he's finally comes up out of the woods. I'm like, dude, where did you go? And he went a long way off. But anyway, we set aside time for guys and to go into the woods with their Bible, with their journal, and just be quiet and be alone. And you may be listening to that and you may be thinking, well, that sounds awful. Or you may be listening to that and thinking, I get an hour by myself to be quiet and not do anything. That is worth the price of admission for me.
Yeah, keep in mind, you don't have your phone.
You don't have your phone. No. Yeah, so no phones allowed.
There's truly no distraction.
Yeah, no phones allowed. And I think we're going to make you do 1,000 push-ups this year to catch the phone.
You can try all you want. There's not a chance. I get 3 out.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can space them out.
No.
The whole point is the solitude. It's so we are so busy, and we always have input of some kind, whether it's someone talking to us, whether it's radio, it's television, it's our iPhone, whatever that may be. We have input, and to be in an environment where the only input is the voice of the Lord. My son came this last year, 18 years old, and that was his favorite time. He said, I want more of that. I said, because after the event, I said, what did you think, bud? what do we do? What do we need to do more of, less of? He said, I want more solitude. I want more time by myself. And guys are very unexpected they don't expect the impact that they have from that. Anything else? Unexpected movement, something you did not expect, and wow, God just blew you away.
No, I mean the whole weekend.
Yeah, the whole weekend.
I mean the whole weekend.
Yeah, same here. One other thing too, I mentioned my son, and we had a group of guys. There actually were I know 3 Eagle Scouts in there, so they knew the way around the campfire, knew the way around the campsite. I'm not sure that they did not have the most impactful weekend of the entire bunch. Just seeing them up front every night, praising God, worshiping the Lord, completely engaged, looking up and seeing them. So they did do a little wrestling around in the campsite. We didn't have many other campsites with 40 or 50-year-old dudes doing much wrestling. So they were still, 18, but they had a blast. And I love to see that.
So, as expected, you've done most of the talking, but I have a question for you. But I have a couple of questions for you.
Please do. So I still get to talk.
So, yeah, you still get to talk. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm just going to sit back and let you take off, okay? So, so far everything we talked about is the Lord and Christian and church. And so, do you have to be a Christian?
Yeah, absolutely not. And I don't. You don't have to be a Christian.
Are we going to call you out around the campfire?
No, gosh, no.
Are there goats involved?
There are no goats. No, there are no goats. I mean, we've got a couple of old goats that are coming, but both of them are at this table. So anyway, no, man, you don't have to be a Christian. Even if you're not, and you come in saying, I'm coming. Not being a Christian, and I am leaving not being a Christian. You are not gonna convert me. That's cool.
Why would somebody that is not a believer? Why would they come?
I think just to be around. For one thing, I think just a weekend of decompression. I mean, we just constantly have pressure. Our jobs, our homes, our everything just puts pressure on us all from every direction. And maybe you don't even realize how tense you are. And just to come in a very relaxed environment where you're going to sit around the campfire, you're going to eat some cool campfire food. Did you get throw some axes, those mandibles? Just relax and chill out. I mean, yeah, you're going to hear people talking about Jesus, and listen, I know a lot of people that aren't believers, aren't Christians, and they're cool talking about Jesus. They're cool talking about religion. Just being able to just decompress, if nothing else, is going to be life changing. Just to go back home, and maybe you're no more spiritual than you were when you came, but just to go back home after a weekend of not having to do anything other than just enjoy yourself. Man, I think you're going to benefit from that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one thing that gives guys hesitation, and I think too, it maybe gives some guys hesitation about inviting a friend. Maybe so and so's a believer, and they want their buddy to go with them who's maybe not a believer. How do they invite them? Well, I think the important thing is exactly what you said. It's a weekend of decompression. It's a weekend of unplugging. It's a weekend of just separating yourself from the world and the daily grind of life. And whether you believe or not, man, there's certain things that as men we're just not willing to talk about except in certain situations, and that includes with our wives. There's things that our wives may not want us to talk to them about. And you have that opportunity to sit around and hear guys start to open up and talk about things that have happened in their life. And honestly, they may or may not tie that back into, and this is what the Lord did. Because some of it may just be, man, I just want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And then the guy on the other side of the campfire is like, man, wow. Yeah, like I hear you, and so my situation's different, but very similar, and so and it just starts a conversation, and the flip side is, man, there's a lot of guys that get a lot out of it just by sitting there and listening, and hearing whatever, and it gives them something to ponder and meditate on, and then. You go 2.5 days without your phone and you think, I can't do it, and you don't really realize the relief you get from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you said 2 questions. You said a couple of questions.
Well, the one was, do you have to be a believer?
Yeah.
And the second was, if you're not, are we going to in any way, shape, form, or fashion call you out?
Yeah, no, and I think that's...
We're not making them wear the pink shirts this year, right?
Yeah, no.
No pink shirts this year.
No, and we never did. Yeah, and I think so I will tell you a story. It actually happened to my aunt. She's passed away a few years ago, and she had come to spend the weekend with us. Our kids were younger at this point in time. She come and spend the weekend with us. Sean and I were going somewhere on a little trip, I can't remember, but then Alexa came back and we're coming back on Sunday. I said, hey, why don't you go to church with us? And she's like, I don't want to go to church. I said, well, I know you don't go to church. I said, but this is important to us as a family. We just want you to go with us. And she kind of pushed back a little bit, and I could tell she was feeling, I don't know if she didn't go to church, and I said, well, what? It's okay. Like, I'm not going to, she said, Mark, I just need to tell you something. I said, okay, I'm sure. She said, I remember when I was a little girl, she said, I don't have anything to wear. I said, well, you can wear what, our church is very laid back. You just wear jeans, shirt, whatever, And she said, I need to tell you, she said, when I was a little girl, she said, we were going to this little church, and she said, I wore a pair of jeans to church one time because it was really, really cold. And there was a lady in the church who came up to me and asked me how I dare wear jeans in church. And she said, I've never been so embarrassed. She said, she was probably 12 years old. She said, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. And she said, you have to promise me no one is going to say something about what I'm wearing. I said, I promise you, no one's. That was a legitimate fear for her. It was legitimate. And some guys may be listening to this and you have a legitimate fear, man, I'm going to be called out. Someone's going to say something to me. I'm going to be asked a question I don't know the answer to, and I can promise you none of that is going to happen. If you are not overly spiritual in your life, you can still benefit from this. That stuff does not happen in our events. So let's talk about the guy, Matt, sitting out there listening to this like, oh, this sounds kind of cool, but I'm still not sure if it's for me. Who would that guy be? What would be some signs that he needs this event, but he may not know he needs this event?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, if you're just looking for a way to get away, like we talked about a while ago, I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but that is, to me, that is one of the biggest things, just to get away, to decompress. Some guys do that, hunting and different things, but even hunting, it's a couple of hours. You still got your phone with you, most of us. This is a weekend where you're getting away from family. Like, some of you don't have family here, but you're getting away from family. You're getting away from work. You're getting away from school sports, whatever it is. I mean, right now in my life, I'm not gonna lie, I'm so fed up with, I love my girls playing volleyball. I absolutely love it, okay? I enjoy going to the games. But the constant schedule shifts and the practices, and I have 2 girls, each playing on 2 different volleyball teams. I have a little boy that's playing little league football. And then, my particular job, the hours are unset. And it's a serious stressor trying to make all this work. I mean, there are weekends where we have 3 different games in 3 different places, and then there may be some work in there too.
There may be some work. I may make some time for work.
Well, I mean, And so I don't think I'm the exception. I think I'm the norm there. I mean, I think it's a battle we all fight. I know that because, there's 50 other parents at each one of these games that are trying to figure out the same thing. So for me right now, like, I'm looking forward to this because I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna shut my phone off, and I'm not worried about anything but just relaxing, de-stressing, separating from the world, and hanging out with some friends, making new friends, eating some good food, having some fun, and for me, I'm looking very forward to the time of worshiping.
Mm.
But, we're going to worship in the morning, we're going to worship in the evening. And that day is going to be filled with other things as far as, the events you talked about and just hanging out with friends and getting to know new people, new friends. And so to answer your question, I think one big thing is life is stressful. Life is busy, life is stressful, and we need a break. And it's a different kind of break than we typically get in life. It's not a vacation where you're still carrying things with you. It is a true shutdown. Right? Did you like my power system?
I did like that. Yes, I like that.
I think I'm Police Academy.
Another movie that probably shouldn't promote that.
Probably not. But just truly getting away. Just truly getting away.
Yeah, yes, and I think what we see with so many guys, and you would echo this, is they live in a pressure cooker of life. It's just, I know some of my kids. Well, my son now has graduated high school, going on to college. My daughter is still in college, and they've been athletes from the time they couldn't play organized sports. They've been athletes, and so we did. Garrett played baseball, Garrett ran track, was pole vaulter. Emma played tennis. Garrett played 1 year of golf in there too. Emma played tennis. Emma runs track. And like you say, and then with those sports, you also have summer programs too, where you're going all year long. And the way our track team was at our high school, the boys and girls don't compete together. So there were a lot of times Garrett and I would be at one and Sean and Emma would be at another place, or vice versa. Then you put in work, then you put in family. And like I say, you're just in this pressure cooker. And life has, I don't know if life is harder than it ever has been, but life definitely has more inputs, more pressure, unless you're really good at turning those off. And we structure the weekend where we unless you want to do 1,000 push-ups, I just made that up, but you never know. And there's some guys that are like, man, I'm so addicted to my phone, I'll do 1,000 push-ups if you let me get on it. So we structure the weekend where the only audio visual is in the tent. It's a rule for us as a phone, and you're like, Jim, are you sure? I saw that look. Like, I've seen that look so many times where I've said something and you went, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. I
just didn't put together what you were talking about. I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me that break too, so I can take a breath.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we structure that weekend to let you release as much of that pressure as you can, and not add to it by having to have your phone in your hand. And we harp on that. We harp on the phones, but how many people have you walked into at Walmart because they were looking on their phone?
I don't know that I have, but I did. All right, so I did the other day almost walk into a wall because I was walking out of a store and looked down at my phone, reading a text message, and looked up, and I was walking into a glass store.
Did I send you that text message? That would make the story better.
I can't remember who did, but I really thought I was headed toward the door. Like, I had set my
those glass doors
in my trajectory, but when I got there, it was not a door, it was just a glass.
Was it Rural King where you think one door's going to open and then suddenly the other door opens, but you're committed to the one you thought was going to open, and then don't look at me like you've never done that. Don't look at me like I'm the only one that's done that.
I think you're the only one
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
Most of
If you're listening,
just gotta read.
if you're listening and you've ever been to Rural King and thought that one side of the glass was going to open and the other one did, please write in and remind us that I'm not the only one that's done that.
You hear that? Like, listen. That's nobody typing.
Yeah, they're going to be typing when they hear. So how about the dude that this life is just boring? Like we've talked about the guy that's. We can hear Shane. Shane, by the way, is still behind me, cracking up at the thought of me trying to go in the wrong door at Rural King. And I don't know about the fact that having a Rural King makes it better, but it just does. My apologies to anyone who's listening that's involved in Tractor Supply. But nonetheless, how about the dude that we talked about, the guy that's in the pressure cooker? I'm trying to pull this out of the ditch here, and you're not helping me. The guy that's got the pressure cooker life. What about the dude that's just, his life is just a boring routine? Know anybody like that? I'm not, you're not. Clearly, you're over busy and overextended and not sleeping enough. But what about the guy that's just like, man, this is like the same day every day, and I'm just bored with life. What about that dude?
Yeah, like the Bill Murrays of the world, the Groundhog Day. You know, it's like every day it's the same, over and over and over again. I just need a change.
Can we mention Groundhog Day?
Well, I can't remember. I've actually never seen the movie, so if it's terrible, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Yeah, my apologies if it is.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a break from any routine, any boringness. It's definitely a weekend. You know, unless you're an avid back whatever.
That's okay because you already said the word boringness.
So let me back up. Unless you're an avid backpacker, hiker, and you just, you have an axe throwing target in your backyard, and you like all the things, throwing handles, like who does that? So, I mean, unless you're really into those sorts of things, it's going to be a completely different weekend, and it will stimulate you. You're going to be entertained and kind of reconnect you with, I think as men, and I think it's been lost in the world, I think as men, there's just a natural attraction to the outdoors. I think it's part of it. I know there's some guys that are going to go, no, I have zero. But I truly believe that most men, if you get them out there, they're going to be like, wow, this really feels good to be out here. So, I think all those things combined, you're living a boring life, you're just tired of it. Well, this gives you a break to just do something entertaining. And it's hopefully outside of your comfort zone. I was listening to a podcast on the way here, and the guy had been coached, and he said, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm.
And there's so much in that, and I mean, and I think actually for most of us, we don't like being uncomfortable. Air conditioning, hot showers, running water, telephones, the world at access in your palm. All these things make us comfortable. I mean, how many of us, and I know they're out there, I know there's a lot of them out there, but most people that I know where our next meal is coming from. We're very, very comfortable. Well, it's very exhilarating to come out here and I never cooked on a campfire. I don't know how I'm going to eat. Well, first of all, we're not going to let you die.
You can't physically starve in that short period of time.
No, you're going to be okay. Right?
And we're in a field of grass.
I'm sure there's an acorn tree out there somewhere, maybe a pecan tree. It'll be that time of year. So you'll get some nuts. So,
it's a hickory nut tree for sure.
There's definitely a hickory nut tree. So, I mean, just kind of get yourself uncomfortable. Put yourself in a situation you've not been in. And when you just have a mundane life, same thing over. If you feel that way, then why don't you get yourself somewhere where you're uncomfortable? For just a couple of days.
Yeah, so the dude that hasn't challenged himself in a long time, there is something about meeting a challenge and overcoming the challenge, or nothing else, just surviving the challenge. So for us, you and I sitting here, I mean, I love to backpack. I love to camp. I know you and your family do a lot of camping. So for us, the camping portion of it is not really, I mean, it is a challenge at our age. You know, sleeping on the ground is always going to be a challenge. But it's not, it's not the camping part's not the challenge, but some guys maybe listen to this and everything we've talked about, the worship, the campfire, the vulnerability, they're like, dude, sign me up. Oh, wait a minute. I thought this was at a conference center somewhere, which I don't know how you would think we'd be building campfires in conference centers, but I don't know. Anyway, maybe you thought they were electric campfires. Wait a minute. This is a camp out. I didn't realize this was a camp out. We saw, so we had a camp experience with a dude that had never been camping before. And he survived, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forgot.
He's been on this podcast, I think.
He has been.
And he survived, but it was a challenge for him.
Yeah.
I had to rescue his tent because he couldn't get it back in the bag. He just wouldn't throw it away. Let me help you with it. So there could be challenge. I'm going to tell you, man, there's something about surviving a weekend that you don't think you can that's going to help you face some other challenges.
Yeah, I think sometimes we talk about a life being a boring routine, but really the only reason it's boring is because you're not being challenged. You're not having to overcome something. And overcoming something, I truly believe that that's an important part of life. If you're not challenging yourself, then you're not growing. You're not living. You're not feeling that just exhilaration. Because maybe you don't conquer anything out here other than just not dying. Or maybe you just get out here and you're like, man, that was rough. You know, I mean, we cannot control the weather, right? Can you?
If I could, it would not have been 97 degrees yesterday.
Amen. Or the last 14 days of my life.
Or ever again in the entire existence of the world.
Ever.
Not where I'm at. Not where I'm at.
So, I mean, it's the middle of October. It wouldn't be insane to have a snowflake. It would be odd. But rain's a real possibility. And we don't know. So, but coming out and facing those challenges and just getting through it, knowing that nobody here going to let you die. You're not even going to get hurt sick. So,
Okay, so
well, you might get hurt because Shane ended up moving a 10-pound table a while ago that was bulky, and you're like, oh, I cannot do it. So you can talk about your age.
Listeners, I have a back injury that he's now making fun of.
Age-related. But I mean, to your point, I feel like we're running circles here, but to your point, just overcoming those challenges is very important.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it'll give you a new sense of self-worth. Like, man, I did that.
If I did that, I can do this.
Absolutely.
If I did that, I can do this.
Absolutely.
And I think, so a couple of other ones I think are definitely worth mentioning here. The dude that, man, I don't know, I didn't know I need this until you mentioned this. And first of all, what about the guy that's on a spiritual journey, but he's disoriented? I know at your age, you can relate to getting disoriented. I'm proud of us, Matt. We've lasted a long time before we started making fun of each other, and I think Terry should commend us for that when he listens to this. But what about the guy that's on the spiritual journey and is disoriented?
Well, it's kind of like this weekend could be a compass to get you back on track, to help. And I don't think that's because of any person here. I truly believe, we started off this podcast with me saying that totally different situation, but the Lord took me out of the world and set me over here and was able to deal with some things. Well, this weekend could be that for that person. That you don't have anything to do with any person here, but just taking the opportunity that the Lord has put before the person on the spiritual journey that maybe is a little disoriented, just taking that opportunity the Lord's given you and letting Him set you out here, away from the world, and let Him talk to you. Maybe that's in solitude. Maybe that's just around the campfire listening to guys. The Lord speaks through guys that don't even know they're speaking through them. You know what I mean? And that may be for you. So if you're listening to this podcast, then you're listening to it for a reason. It's not by chance.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord has put this in your ear for some reason. And if you're the person on the spiritual journey that maybe doesn't know the next turn to make, maybe this camp will give the Lord the opportunity to give you that direction.
Yeah. I think too, like you said, doesn't mean you're lost. And I think a lot of times our disorientation is that feeling of, I know there's something else, but I don't know what that else is, and I don't know how to find it. And for a lot of guys, that else, that thing, is community. So I think maybe the last thing to mention, maybe one of the most prevalent, is the men that are isolated or insulated. I didn't come up with either one of those terms or either one of these,
No, they've been in Webster's for a while.
I know, but what I mean is isolation. I'm just going to keep talking. Isolation is when a man removes himself from others so that he does not have to deal with an issue. And we see that. We've done that. You've done that. I've done that. What is more prevalent? We talk about isolation a lot. What is more prevalent is insulation. This is totally my theory, but what's more prevalent is insulation, which means I'm going to be around you, but I'm not going to let you get close enough to see what's really going on. So if you're listening to this and you are isolated, you need community, right? If you're listening to this and you're insulated, you need vulnerability. And both of those are scary, but if you're in one of those situations, you know this is what you need. And the guy that's isolated, the guy that's insulated, needs to be in a place where he removes that insulation, or he puts himself back in community so he can deal with some issues, and then he can move on and be the man God's called him to be. All right. Well, Matt, we have just about used up our time.
You have.
I have done a lot of the talking.
Well, in your defense, we had a call this morning, and you said you didn't want to talk because you wanted to save your words. And I think you've used them all.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to have to just write on paper and pass notes to people the rest of the day. All right.
Oh, we can only be so lucky.
So let's end with an invitation. Let's end with the invitation to the listeners to join us at Man Up. Go to our website, Man Up Camp. Thank you. My mind just went blank. I thought it would be on your hat or just somehow appear.
You're running out of words.
I'm running out of words. Why don't you tell people where they can find us? I apparently am out of words.
I don't know. Shane, tell me if I'm wrong. It's manupadventurecamp.com.
manupadventure.com.
Manupadventure.com.
Hopefully they'll edit this out. So let's start this over.
Check it out. There's an FAQ on there. And then you can reach out and sign up through there.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes. Put the dates in the show notes so that you guys can see all those.
And it's gonna be good. Now we're gonna have some, you're gonna cook most your meals, but we're gonna provide you with one.
Yeah, we got one. We got one
I
coming.
think it's gonna be a decent meal.
Are you cooking it?
Supposed to.
Okay, so you can bring an extra meal just in case. Just in case. Maybe a little extra breakfast that day, just in case. So nonetheless, join us. You can find it. You can find our website. You can find the dates. You can find all this stuff below For this episode of Man Up, I've been Mark Mohler, joined by Matt Haney.
This is the last time you will ever hear us on this podcast.
I'm pretty sure
Once Terry hears
this, he will be back. And probably will not let this happen again. But you never know. You never know. He does go on one vacation a year, so maybe that'll be our next shot. Nonetheless, thank you for joining us.
these days too. So by next year, he may forget the train wreck. I heard him crashing all over.
Yeah, he might. Join us next time on the Man Up Podcast.
Hey, Terry Gwaltney here from the Man Up Podcast. Listen, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you supporting the podcast, listening to it. We hope it's adding a ton of value to your life. Also want to ask you to do us a favor. If you could like and share this podcast on wherever you consume your social media content, whether that be YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, we would appreciate it. It just helps us get the word out so we can help more people. And maybe you've never experienced the Man Up Adventure Camp that we do in October. You can check out our Facebook or our website, manup-camp.com. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the Man Up Podcast, and we'll see you soon.